To my friend Nate and all the listeners of this podcast, no one circles the wagons than Nate Discate. Circle the wagons, Buffalo.
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now?
Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo! Hey, hey, let's go Buffalo!
The Bills make me wanna shout.
Welcome to the Circling the Wagons podcast, a podcast discussing the Bills all year round with interviews, news, recaps, and insightful fan discussion. Most times. Here's your host and lifelong Bills fan, Nate.
It is Buffalo Bills free agency, 2024 free agency. Lots of players leaving, some new players coming, and some other players staying. So we've got a lot to talk about in this episode of Circling the Wagons, a Buffalo Bills fan podcast. Hello, everyone. My name is Nate. I am the host of Circling the Wagons, and I'm with my co-host John to discuss the Buffalo Bills 2024 free agency. We weren't here the last few weeks. I was on vacation, wasn't able to get to a microphone out of the state. So now we're here. We're going to discuss the players that have stayed, the players that we've let go, the players that are coming in, and some potential needs of new positions, new players that could come around because we have some holes. We have our big board of Buffalo Bills needs that we have to go over. John and I are going to discuss that in this episode, like where we see the biggest needs, where they could fill that in free agency or possibly look towards the draft as we finalize that. But first, I'm joined by my co-host, John, to break down all these moves, everything that's happened over the last few weeks, and everything that could still happen in the next few weeks. John, how's it going, man?
It's going good. Free agency is always exciting, always has been, and with the draft coming up just over a month away, it's good. I like this time of year.
Yeah, every team's getting better. No one's getting worse. It feels like everyone's only positive, except for the Bills at the beginning. They made a lot of news for letting go of so many players, right? Like it felt like they were the only team that was releasing like a bunch of really well-known, Pro Bowlers, All Pros players like that of any team out there. So they needed to get cap positive, or we're going to talk about those moves, but usually it's not like that. This was, John, just in general, like especially the way this started with all those releases, it felt like this was the biggest change and turnover of key players on the roster that's happened since Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have been here. You know what I mean? Like this felt like the biggest like, wow, we're actually like losing people. We're actually losing good players for the first time. And I understand the reasoning and the logic behind all the moves. But like last year we lost Tremaine Edmonds. That was the biggest loss that we had really had in the tenure, I feel like. But this last couple of weeks, the losses of Tre'Davious White, Micah Hyde was a free agent, but like the cuts of Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse. It just felt different,
Yeah, it's definitely the most significant of this era. There were people comparing it to when Thurman Thomas, Hunter Reed, and Bruce Smith were let go, but it's not the same as that.
No,
by any means on different levels. Most of it was expected, though. The only unexpected thing I would say was Mitch Morse. Everything else, I think we're kind of like Tre'Davious White was one of the first things I had mentioned in earlier podcasts that like, well, they're going to cut him, and it's unfortunate. I love Tre'Davious White. I'm not saying that I don't, but it's just a necessity at this point. It took him a year and a half to come back, and then and look good again, and then another injury. It's just really unfortunate. I feel bad for the guy, but Jordan Poyer, he clearly had lost a step. And then, Deontay Hardy didn't really contribute that much. Nyheim Hines is another unfortunate case, but they say $5 million from cutting it. Like most of this was expected. And the same thing for the free agents lost. They weren't going to re-sign Dane Jackson or Leonard Floyd and so even Dodson. So Gabe Davis, we had already talked about before.
A lot of the things that we talked about before free agency happened that we thought was going to happen. Now, the biggest, so let's go into biggest surprise, or maybe even biggest disappointment so far in free agency from any movement, either a guy coming in or a guy leaving. And I'm going to start just positionally, which was the biggest surprise and disappointment for me, was the release of Mitch Morse. Because when we talked about it before free agency, we wanted to keep Mitch Morse. We're like, who do you keep, Daquan Jones or Mitch Morse? We're like, Mitch Morse. He's the linchpin of that offense. They don't really have someone. I mean, they did at the time. They had Ryan Bates, technically, before he was traded to take over that position. So, okay, I get cutting him, but then they traded away the other guy that could have played center. So, I mean, Mitch Morse is one of those guys that just the moment he walked in the door, he just seemed like a Buffalo guy. You know what I mean? Some players are just like that. So I think, around the community, the way that he talked about everything, the way he just felt like a Buffalo guy. And he was one of their most talented offensive linemen for a while, just because, they didn't have a ton of talent there. Now they have more talent. So, he was still had one of the best seasons of all the offensive linemen last year. I think it was just disappointing. I didn't expect it. It stinks because I don't think we necessarily have a great backup for him right now, since they did trade Ryan Bates. I think it's more so they say that Connor McGovern is going to take over at center because, let's face it, Brandon Beane needs to say that there's someone there to take over at that position, because if he doesn't, then everyone's going to know that he's going to target him in the first round of the draft, right? So, if he's not oh, yeah, Connor McGovern, if he's no, we don't really have someone there, it'll be like the year that the Bills traded or the Bills needed a cornerback because Tre'Davious White, which we just mentioned, was coming off an ACL injury. They needed a cornerback, and who did they draft? The Chiefs went ahead of the Buffalo Bills and drafted drafted Trent McDuffie. So the Bills had to take Kaiir Elam because it was that big of a need, and everyone knew that the Bills wanted a cornerback. So anyway, that was my biggest disappointment. The one I liked the least, I guess, of all the moves so far. What about you?
So, to play devil's advocate a little bit on that one, I definitely agree. We talked about Mitch Morse, and I was all for keeping him, despite, the concussion history and getting older and everything else. But they kind of have a plan A, B, C already. Connor McGovern is plan A. Alec Anderson would be plan B, and then a draft pick. Since they have 11 of them, you would think one of them would be interior offensive line, would be plan C. So they kind of have that still. Aside from that, it might still be the most disappointing for me, but if I had to pick something else, I might say Matt Hawk.
Yeah.
So
fair.
We're talking about kicker and punter and stuff, right? As towards the bottom of our needs list, because they're kickers and punters. Because Sam Martin got injured, okay, whatever, but he still wasn't spectacular in the year. And they signed Matt Hawk back, who was not good.
He was awful. He was terrible.
All right, so now it's a punter competition between. So Martin's probably going to win it.
Yeah, exactly. We were hoping for a potential upgrade or someone with upside, and you're like, this is the worst free agent that we've ever signed, Matt Hawk.
Right. I would have picked Mitchell Trubisky, but if Allen goes down, then it doesn't matter who the backup is. So I'm
yeah,
whatever.
I was kind of really
doesn't matter if it's Kyle Allen or whoever.
Yeah, I know.
Done if Josh Allen goes down.
Exactly. Mitchell Trubisky signed a 2-year, $5.25 million deal. It's almost. It's not that far above. What is it league minimum is what, $1 million or something like that. If you have that much experience, $1.5 million. So he's not making that much more above. Whatever. That's fine. Like you said, if it goes down, I don't have any faith. there's no way they're going to be able to afford a Gardner Minshew or anything like that we all want, as a backup for Josh Allen. So we're going to get the bottom of the barrel, and that's fine. They're friends, apparently.
How about the Steelers? They get Russell Wilson, and then they're like, "Oh, you know what? We'll get Justin Fields too. We'll see what happens." That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is.
Because I don't think either one is more than a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah, I don't think so.
But they get a year to kind of look at what they have and then go from there. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. It's smart if you think about it. They went from having no quarterbacks on the roster, seemingly, to having 2 potential starters. You just need one to outshine the other, right? You just don't need them to both torpedo and be terrible at this age. But yeah, that's That's really funny. The Matt Hawk sighting was disappointing, I guess. Yeah, I wanted someone better, and I'm sure you were thinking that too. Punt God got signed by the Chiefs, which we mentioned, last episode. One thing that I will mention disappointing, and this is just on an emotional level because you mentioned Tre'Davious White. I mean, it sucks losing Trey White. It really does. I mentioned how Mitch Morse was Buffalo like through and through. Like Trey was Buffalo like the moment he was drafted. I mean, he was our first draft pick of the McDermott era, and he was really good. And he was so likable. He's got such a good sense of humor. I mean, there's just that one hurt. That one hurt a lot. More than the Poyer, more than the Hyde, things, more than Mitch Morse. That one was just purely emotional, not because I think like he can definitely play at a high level. I think he probably could in another year or so, like a high level, maybe not as high of a level as he played with us recently, but yeah, that one stung a little bit on an emotional level more so than I think he's worth the money. Why did you get rid of him, sort of thing? But it is what it is. It's a business. We'll always remember Trey. Hopefully he somehow like retires as a Bill or something or comes back. Who knows? Who knows? We'll see. Favorite, John. Now, what is your favorite free agent move, signing, release, whatever, so far in free agency this year?
Oh, this is tough. You
could even do extension because there have been a couple of extensions. Guys that were not set to hit free agency that got extensions. I'm saying Deion Dawkins had a 3-year, $60 million extension. Taron Johnson just got a 3-year, $31 million extension to be the highest paid nickel cornerback in the league. Like, I mean, there's lots of things to choose from.
You're not making this any easier by throwing more variables into
I know.
it. Like, oh, you can pick this too. All right, so I'm going to break it down I'm going to figure it out this way. I'm going to talk myself through it. So my favorite new signing so far, which hasn't been a lot of new signings, is Curtis Samuel. Really nice slot receiver. He can do some different things. But they also retained a bunch of guys, and that's hard, right? So they re-signed / extended David Edwards, starting guard, Daquan Jones, starting defensive tackle, and then the Epenesa one is nice too. And then at safety, they also retained Taylor Rapp and Cam Lewis, which, I mean, if they didn't do that, then it would just be Damar Hamlin, basically.
Yeah.
So that's a lot to pick from.
You can rank them.
That's not counting like Von Miller reworking his contract and taking a pay cut. Knox took a pay cut and like other extensions. Like there's all these things. They did a lot of good things so far.
Dude, I'm glad you brought up the pay cuts with Knox and Miller. Von Miller taking a pay cut was one of my favorite moves. As sad as that is, not my favorite, but it is one of my favorite moves. The fact that he did that he was willing to do that, the fact that the Bills could get him to do that, like I love that.
Yeah, I agree. I if I had to pick, I'm gonna say resigning Daquan Jones.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, John. John, is it for everything we mentioned before the free agency, the last episode that we did before free agency? Because I mean, it was just like the defense is a different defense. Ed Oliver plays differently next to Daquan Jones. Daquan Jones is the best defensive tackle they've had at that position in the McDermott era, and they've brought in so many. I mean, they brought in Poona Ford, they brought in Linval Joseph, they brought in Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips. They keep on bringing in guys, and no one's been better than Daquan. No one's made nearly as close to an effect as Daquan. So that's all those reasons why I'm with you. I love if they had signed or released Mitch Morse and not signed Daquan Jones, I'd be pissed right now. I'm like, are you kidding me? We didn't even get Daquan and we got rid of Morse. Like, what are we even doing here? At least I can somewhat justify it in my head that it's okay. It's all right. At least we kept Daquan. What about I like how you mentioned Cam Lewis. It's not one of my favorites, but I do like it. We technically have 2 starting safeties now with Taylor Rapp at the Jordan Poyer position and now strong safety, and now we have Cam Lewis, who's a cheap potential starter, 2-year, $3 million contract. We're talking vet minimum here, but I mean, there's a potential that he starts there. He knows the system. He's been here forever. I like that signing.
Cam Lewis is significant too because he can play corner as well. And we heard today that Julian Blackmon is visiting Buffalo, safety from Indy, and he's a younger guy, and they're probably going to want to sign a couple of safeties before the draft, I would think. And there's a bunch of safeties still available, including Micah Hyde, by the way. So you never know.
Oh, don't stop it, John. Don't tease me like that. I don't want to even think. I don't want to even. It's like when when a girl breaks up with you or something, and you're starting to get over her, and it's just like one of your buddies like, "Hey, man, she might come back," and you're like, "Don't say that. I don't even want to think about it," even though it's not good that she would come back. So it's not quite like that with Micah Hyde. Like Micah Hyde, it would kind of be like that because Micah Hyde coming back isn't a great sign. It doesn't mean that it's not like he's gotten better since last year, right? I mean, it's unlikely. So
he's got the injury history. It would be cheap though. That's the thing.
It'd be very cheap. You got to figure someone else is going to pick him up, but someone else is going to need a starter. There's going to be an injury or something, but because he is healthy, so yeah. Hey, what'd you think of? While we're talking about safety, Bills safeties, former safeties as of now, what'd you think about Poyer going to the enemy, the Finns, the Dolphins?
Well, I don't know. He's really good at making tackles 10 yards downfield this last year. So,
It's like when that happened.
I love Poyer. I don't get me. I love Poyer. Stop it. I'm not.
You stop it. You're the one you're like, stop it. It's fine. We love him.
You're like the reporter asking the question. Like I know. I'm gonna try to get him to say something.
So you hate Jordan Poyer right now, John? Dude, it's so funny. People were surprised that happened at all. I can't believe he went to the Dolphins. Like you mentioned, Thurman going to the Dolphins. That was so much different. I mean, I will say it was similar because it is at the end of both of their careers. Like Poyer.
Thurman Thomas found out he was cut by watching TV, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one difference.
Don't you think though? Like this is just a general, free agency thing, but like the release of all those guys. Like, isn't that a good thing? Isn't that a good thing that Bean did that? Because he allowed all of them to talk to representation before the tampering window. So, like, he did them a solid by doing that. Like, he didn't have to do that before.
Yeah, Bean is I like Bean for a lot of reasons, and that's one of them. The other thing of note is, like, a lot of these players that were lost were defensive players. And if you look at last season, the defense was riddled with injuries, and they still played really well and at a high level all the way up until the last game of the year, for some reason the Chiefs played their best game on offense the whole year.
No kidding.
Which was unfortunate, but I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think extending Taron Johnson was part of that key because he's the veteran back there now. Obviously besides Rasul Douglas, but he's been here the longest. He's the captain back there to take over with White, Poyer, and Hyde gone, and those guys were the three staples of the secondary. So it's all new. It's a youth movement, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, so other moves that I liked. Poyer going to Miami, real quick, Poyer going to Miami was not a surprise at all. He lives down in Miami. They were interested in him last year. I'm not surprised. I don't hate it. It's like, the guy balled. Like we said, we love Jordan Poyer as far as he tried really hard. I mean, he drove to Kansas City and back with a punctured lung for us, for the team, not for us as fans, but you got to respect that. You got to respect the hell out of it. He played his heart out. He was good in the community. Gonna miss Poyer for sure. Other free agent moves that I liked, obviously the Josh Allen, restructuring, which was going to happen. We knew that was going to clear almost $17 million in space. I like how we haven't even mentioned this guy's name yet is very surprising, but Curtis Samuel, he's one of my favorite moves so far in free agency. I didn't necessarily see it coming, but I'm really excited. John, did you like that as much as I did?
Yeah, so I did mention it before.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I glossed over it when I started thinking about very quickly when I started thinking about the re-signings that they made. But no, I think it's their best new signing so far. He's probably going to replace Khalil Shakir, which a lot of people were high on, including myself. But he is an improvement there still, I think.
An improvement over Gabe Davis, or just in general to the wide receiving core?
An improvement over Shakir.
Shakir, okay.
I think they still need a number 2 receiver, and I think that's going to be addressed in the draft. at this point.
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that the Bills don't look at this signing and like, well, we don't need to take wide receiver in the first round. It's like, no, you could still upgrade. Like you could still get a better player than Curtis Samuel, or maybe potentially over Stephon Diggs in the first round.
Yeah, unless they get like Mike Williams also, which doesn't seem likely. But yeah, I think they're gonna have to draft a guy and maybe two guys.
So Curtis Samuel got a lot of looks in the slot. He's also been playing on the outside. Sometimes he lines up in the backfield. He's a versatile player. He's a fast player. He had a 4.31 40-yard dash. Lots of things to like about him. He's got he's got good hands. Think of him like a younger Emmanuel Sanders, right? Like when Emmanuel Sanders came here, he was like 32 or 33, like, and he was done with his career. Still fast, still a good weapon. Like John Brown, still like kind of fast, but at the end of his career. Like Curtis Samuel isn't at the end of his career. Like he's still got some years left in him. So he's got the speed. He's got better hands. He had his best season under Joe Brady as his offensive coordinator in Carolina. Carolina when he was with the Panthers. So I mean, if you looked at the quarterbacks that Curtis Samuel has played with, and he's put up still like decent 6, 7, 800-yard seasons, like that's pretty good. Josh Allen does bring out the best in his wide receivers.
I like how you mentioned Emmanuel Sanders. I think he had jersey number 1.
Yeah. Is that what Samuel is?
Curtis Samuel's going to be number 1 too. He's definitely a versatile player for all the reasons that you listed. And I think he's better than, like, he makes me. So last year when they picked up Trent Sherfield and Deontay Hardy, they were kind of meh to me, where Samuel's to me is a better pickup than those guys who were at the same time last year.
Yeah, he moves the needle, but he's not, I mean, obviously he's not, one of these $14, $15 million guys, but
no, but he's got a much lower floor. I think he's going to definitely contribute. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to be at the expense of Shakir. So like people who are looking for Shakir to break out, I don't know if that's going to happen now.
Yeah, I agree.
Do a lot of the same things.
It'll be interesting to see how they use him, how they're able to utilize him. Are they still going to do 2 tight end sets? Are they going to do more, 3 wide receiver sets? Because right now, don't forget, Shakir can play on the outside as well. He did so in college. He did so with the Buffalo Bills. Like, he can play on the outside, so he's not. So right now, the Bills' starting 3 receivers are Diggs, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir. So that's still the case. So, I mean, either they're interchangeable at this point. Like, one could be in the slot, one could be outside, vice versa, right? Like, we just don't know. It's not like, but you're right. It is more likely that Curtis Samuel is going to get the bulk of the snaps over Khalil Shakir at this point, but we'll see what happens. So yeah, that was my favorite. I did it. Go ahead.
No, the thought just entered in my head. Well, what if they don't address wide receiver in the draft?
Oh, don't say that. Don't say that, John. Jeez. I should have just kept talking. I didn't know you were going to bring that negativity right now.
Because then you got like a couple of guys that are predominantly slot, but maybe sometimes play outside, and then you got Matt Collins, kind of meh. There's a lot of. I mean, they could make do, but it's not. I mean, they got KJ Hamler they brought in. Maybe he could do something.
Matt Collins reminds me of like who's that guy? Who's the touchdown Jesus that we had a couple of years ago? Kind of reminds me of him.
That receiver?
Yeah, receiver. What was his name from the Packers? That Aaron Rodgers was upset that we.
Yeah, I know you're talking.
You know what I'm talking about. Him, like, so, like, and he's a guy that has huge size. So, like, 6'4", potentially. Something there, but just like Trent Sherfield, like we signed Trent Sherfield, like, oh, maybe there's something there. There wasn't. I don't put any thought so much into these kind of guys like the Deontay Hardys and the Trent Sherfields. Like, in my head, it's like, it would be great, but I'll believe it when I see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They also got Justin Shorter on the roster, but the thing that concerns me about that is, like, I know that he got injured, whatever, but it almost seemed like it was, I don't know if it's true or not, but it almost seemed like it was just a roster move to kind of stash him there.
Agreed. It did seem like that. He's played healthy in the last preseason game, and he's come down with an injury. Yeah. I wonder if it feels like the Bills have done that before. Like, didn't they do that with Isaiah Hodgins a couple of years? It didn't seem like Isaiah Hodgins was truly injured, and all of a sudden he's on the IR, like right before the season. Like, really? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
We'll see. I wonder if that ever comes around and they like lose picks because of it. Probably not. I don't know if every team does that, but Beane's good at doing it.
Speaking of losing picks, like shouldn't it? So the Bills got a 4th round pick for the loss of Edmonds, but like everything that I read is it should have been a 3rd-round pick, right?
Yes. Yeah, I read that over Twitter. There's this who's the comp pick guy on Twitter? I can't remember who it is.
I don't remember.
I retweeted it. There's a guy who does all this, does all this data and everything in the background, and he said that this is one of like 2 or 3 that the NFL really got wrong. And yeah, the Bills should have gotten more for the Tremaine Edmonds. Yeah, I can't find it, but basically, yeah, everything you said, they should have got. And everyone, I mean, I was listening to Joe Biscaglia talk about that. He's like, Brandon Beane thought he was getting a 3rd-round pick for that. Like he was convinced, like people thought that. So that's kind of a gut punch a little bit. I mean, obviously, having a 3rd-round pick is a much better, chance of finding a starter than a 4th-round pick. It makes me think that they're less likely to trade up potentially, but we'll see. It all matters how
at least a 32 pick difference, depending on how many picks are in between for those extra picks.
Yeah, you're right. Huge. So,
can you trade those picks? I can't remember.
Yes, now you can. You weren't able to up until about a couple of years ago. Now you're able to. We were talking about Curtis Samuel versus Gabe Davis, right? Like at that position, and I put a poll on Twitter like, you could have Curtis Samuel for $8 million a year, which is his contract, or Gabriel Davis for $13 million a year, which is what he signed for in Jacksonville. What do you choose? And over 95% of people picked Curtis Samuel's contract. Like of 1,000 people voting, it was, it was a no-brainer. To me, it's a no-brainer too. Like I like Gabe Davis. I didn't love him. I don't love him $13 million worth. Like it's just
no. Yeah, it's too much, and we knew that it was going to go down like that. So.
Yeah, you and I talked specifically about that before the season in regards to he's going to do one of 2 things. He's going to like price himself out because he's going to play well, or he's just going to price himself out because he doesn't play like garbage. And he didn't play like garbage, so there's no way that they were going to retain him. I mean, he was just...
Yeah, it didn't matter how good or bad he did for us in the last year. There's no way they're going to be able to retain him.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't have... they didn't have that cap flexibility this season. Let's see, some of the other moves, as you mentioned, Taylor Rapp. I like that. I don't love that signing. It's okay. I thought he left a lot on the table. Everyone will remember, obviously, the Dolphins' interception that he had against Tua over Tyreek Hill, which was obviously a great play. But, I mean, he didn't have an underwhelming season, but there must be something that Bobby Babich and Sean McDermott and the Bills' defensive staff, that they really liked either the way that he picked up the system or whatever, because they signed him to a 1-year deal last season. We thought he could have been a starter. We thought that was a great pickup, by the way, is like depth, right? Like it's like a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. Like it was great. And now he signs a contract extension. I'm just curious to see like if he picks up and he can be coached up well enough to play at like a Jordan Poyer level of play, because I'm not convinced that at this point. I'm just kind of hoping he does,
Yeah, I don't think he'll be as good as Poyer was at his peak. He's definitely a really hard hitter, and I like him. But there's always the risk of that 15-yard penalty.
A little too hard. Taylor, dial it back. Yeah. There's definitely the worry about that for sure. But I mean, they have a starter now, so in that position, so it's one less of a need. John, do you want to talk about any of these other signings? I mean, we talked about Miller, Hawk, Trubisky, Deion Dawkins extension. I was happy they extended Deion Dawkins. Deion Dawkins had a great year last season. The only mark I'll say on the Deion Dawkins season is that play against the Kansas City Chiefs game in the playoffs when he got bumped. Or he got pushed back by Chris Jones, which, let's be honest, like 99% of all tackles would be pushed back by Chris Jones, the best, defensive tackle in the league. And he got pushed back into Josh Allen when he was releasing that pass to Khalil Shakir in the end zone. That's the only knock I'll put on Deion Dawkins. Otherwise, I love him. I'm glad he's going to be there to stay. Guess, John, pop quiz. Guess who is the oldest player on the Bills' offensive roster?
Stephon Diggs.
Yes, it is Stephon Diggs. Good call. 30 years old. He is the oldest player on the Bills starting offense. Youth movement, man.
Which is pretty incredible. Like, yeah, 30 is the oldest. That's so like I think the only ones that we didn't talk about too much were I just had it and I lost
Ty
it.
Johnson got re-signed.
Yeah, that was one of them. Ty Johnson. So
Nick
like he's
Morrow,
probably
the outside linebacker.
yes. Morrow was the one I was going to talk about. So he kind of seems like a replacement for me for Dodson. He's good against the run, not so much against the pass. And he's got starting experience. He's probably going to be more depth for them considering they have Milano and Bernard and Dorian Williams.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my favorite things to do is look at tweets or posts on like message boards after a player has left a team and see what those fans are saying. And they didn't have a whole lot of good things to say about this. I'm just gonna read a couple of comments.
But were the comments before or after he signed somewhere else? Because I think that makes a difference for a lot of people. Like, oh, he's gone. Oh, he sucks now, right?
Well, but
if they kept him, it's like, oh, that was a good re-sign.
So this is how I'll say this. This is one of my favorite things to do to see if it was a good free agent signing. If I don't know the player, like obviously I didn't know who Nick Morrow was, but when Rasul Douglas was traded to the Bills, all the Packers fans in the comments were like, "No, this sucks. Like, why did we do it? Like, we love Rasul. Like, you'll always have a place here." Like that kind of reaction, right? Like that's what you want. It doesn't happen very often.
That's like a money signing when that happens. Right?
Exactly. You're like, all right, this is what I'm talking about, right? Sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes they're like, well, he's okay. We'll see. But here, let me show you what I'm. So like right here, like this is like this first comment under it. The first comment under the tweet was, "I'm sorry, Bills fans." Like right, like that's pretty funny. There's Eric, this guy on Twitter, Eric Redsnick or whatever. He's like, dude looked lost in every Eagles game I watched. Hopefully it's for a core special teamer role. Absolute third string backup behind Dotson and Williams. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think he is behind. Well, Dotson is on the team, but he's behind Bernard, Williams, and Milano for sure. Anyway, so
yeah, for sure, he's got to be.
So, for a depth guy with starting experience who's good against the run, I'll take it.
Sorry, Bills fans was god awful last year.
Yeah.
The only people saying anything positive are Bills fans. Another tackling machine to pair with Milano. Yeah. Then that's like a Bills fan saying that, and then Eagles fans underneath are like, tackling machine, ha ha ha, lol. It's like 10 crying, laughing emojis. Maybe 20 yards after the first down marker. Not sure who I've seen get burnt more last season, him or Bradbury.
Well, let's also put this in perspective. Out of all the new signings the Bills have had, he's probably second best after Curtis Samuel. I'd put him over Matt Collins. And then after that, it's Mitch Trubisky and Matt Hawk.
Would you put him in number 2 of a new player? Jeez, you're right. Man, when you say it like 5. That, like
one's a backup.
I don't like Mitchell Trubisky.
So it's really between Hollins and him for the next best guy.
I like Matt Collins better. I like the wide receiver better. I'll take him over Nick Morrow. That's what I'll say.
3, 4. I mean, Hollins is probably going to be. They're going to draft somebody, so he's going to be the 5th receiver probably.
Yeah, and probably.
And then Morrow is 1, 2, 3, probably 4th. Maybe he's 5th now. Maybe he's behind Balin Spector. So.
Yeah, he's definitely behind Balin Spector at this point. It's got to be.
So yeah, maybe it's similar. It's a similar thing. And if he can play special teams, that might give him a leg up over Hollins.
So let's see.
I don't know if Hollins plays special teams. Does he?
Yes, he does.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I did see that. So yeah.
So we got some special teams play there.
Yeah, maybe I'll give you Hollins. So Morrow will be 3rd then. The 3rd best signing.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Man, that doesn't make it. There's not been a lot of good signings. I mean, there's been some good.
But Julian Blackmon is visited, and that would bump him up probably to 2nd.
Oh, easily. Absolutely 2nd. Now you have a starting safety alongside, Taylor Rapp.
And maybe even 1st. It's like a 1A, 1B, I would think. And then I did see that. I don't know.
You put that. Sorry. Is it Dorian Blackmon? Is that his name? Dorian Blackmon, or is it? I keep on thinking Julie. Okay, I keep on thinking Justin Blackmon, the wide receiver.
Justin Blackmon is the receiver.
Yeah. So Julian Blackmon, if he signs, you'd put him on the same level as Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, same tier of signing. Yeah.
Okay.
And then they did a few days ago. Sebastian Joseph Day, defensive tackle, visited Buffalo. I don't think I would put him in the same tier as like Samuel or Blackman, but that would be more depth at defensive tackle potentially.
You know what's crazy is the Bills were in on Eric Armstead.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy?
Mm-hmm.
Like they already have their 2 starting defensive tackles.
They do a heavy defensive line rotation.
They do.
So they're going to need more than what they have at both those positions, but especially defensive tackle, because they kind of got their top. They already have 4 at defensive end. Cameron Klein is the 5th. I don't know how that's going to go, but Kingsley Jonathan, AJ Epenesa, Rousseau Miller, like those guys are going to be there no matter what.
Yeah, I know. Tackle,
it's just Oliver Jones, and then just like a guy they had,
Eli Anku.
Yeah. Yes.
I like that they brought. We didn't really mention this. I like that they brought back AJ Epinesa. We briefly mentioned it. It was like, to me, it's just like a good solid signing. It reminds me of like a Shaq Lawson that's younger and that has better pass rush. So he's a better pass rusher than he is a run defender. So like, I like that they signed him because he's still, I think, has upside, and he started to really, really show it the last season or so. I like that signing. I think it's good depth. We were just speaking about depth on the defensive tackle. I like that signing, John. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I agree. They did really well with re-signing like all 7 guys that they re-signed. I agree with 100%. Ty Johnson, Quentin Morris, who is a exclusive rights free agent. They re-signed him. I think he was exclusive rights.
Yep.
And then David Edwards, he's starting. Daquan Jones, he's starting. AJ Epinesa, who's heavily going to be in the rotation, at least 50%, I would think. Well, maybe he wasn't 50% last year, but he should be close to that. And then Taylor Eppenkamp Lewis. All those guys I thought were great re-signs. Like if I had to pick anybody else to resign, who would you pick to resign over them out of all the guys that they lost? Not released, but lost. So you got Leonard Floyd, Gabe Davis, Dane Jackson, Sherfield, Punafore, Tyrell Dodson, maybe, and then Tim Settle. Like the guys that they resigned, I think they did well.
Yeah, I like that. I think you said like they kind of hit it out of the park with the guys that they brought back. There was one free agent that you mentioned there. I'm trying to remember who you said that like when they re-signed him, I was like, that's great. They brought. Let me see. I'm going through the list.
To clarify, those are free agents that they have already lost to other teams. There's still free agents who haven't been signed yet, like Micah Hyde, Matakavich, Linville Joseph, Jordan.
Oh, the David Edwards. The David Edwards. Yeah, for sure. They could bring back any of those guys, I'm sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
David Edwards, I like that one a lot because to me it shows that they thought he was that good that they could, not only have him step in for Connor McGovern, but also move Connor McGovern to center, potentially. And that they didn't keep Ryan Bates, because they could have kept Ryan Bates. He could play center, guard, whatever.
Right. And I do like their immediate backups, like Ryan Vandermark, we talked about last offseason. I think he's a really good backup tackle. And then Alec Anderson can play guard or safety. And they still have Tommy Doyle and then a couple of other guys. And they're going to draft somebody. They have 11 picks. They're going to draft somebody on the offensive line at some point. So I think they're looking really good on the offensive line. And
so before we get into like the big board of Bills needs, is there anything else you want to talk about just in general for the free agency discussion thus far, the way that it's happened as of like Monday night late, or is that it?
I think we covered everything.
Because like the way that we left the big board of Bills needs, going into this was, we had wide receiver at the top. We had defensive tackle next. These are our first tier needs, I should say. Wide receiver, defensive tackle, safety, defensive end, and then our second tier, needs offensive line. We were thinking guard, center, but I mean potentially tackle in there as well. Running back, linebacker, backup quarterback, kicker, punter. I think we can probably take backup quarterback off completely.
So I kind of almost have 4 tiers now instead of 2 tiers.
Okay.
For the first tier, I think we can make defensive end into the second tier. What do you think?
So this is because they brought back Epenesa. Okay.
They brought back Epenesa. So they have like 4 guys already: Miller, Rousseau, Epenesa, and Kingsley Jonathan, plus Cameron. So
I like that. I like that.
4 guys that are definitely staying on the roster, whereas my tier 1's receiver, you still need a wide receiver too.
Yep.
Safety, I think you still need another starter.
Oh, yeah.
At least. And then defensive tackle, you brought back your starter, but you have no depth whatsoever.
Exactly.
So I think receiver, safety, and defensive tackle are tier 1. I'm going to push defensive end into tier 2.
By itself or other? Are you going to put?
No, I would put. Yeah, I was going to put inside offensive lineman, guard / center in with that.
Okay.
Is it like a depth thing? Yeah.
That makes sense. So what do you have? Okay, so that stands in a second tier all by itself then?
Yeah, those two, I would say, yeah.
Okay, so then your third tier would be what? Like, it's got to have running back in it too, right?
So
I know you hate running backs.
You know how I feel about running back, so
yeah.
You might feel differently. But my tier 3 would be cornerback depth by itself.
Oh, okay.
And then my 4th tier would be a running back with a returner and then kicker punter. So that shows you how much I value running back. I mean, feel free to bump up running back if you want, but you know all those drought years where I was complaining about them like drafting and trading for first round running backs when it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So I'm still on that boat.
So I think I like that because I like quarterback being in its own tier because that's a position they're going to draft no matter what. Like they will draft at least one cornerback in this draft.
Sure.
And because you can never have too many, and they always do. I mean, they could pick another 7th round Dane Jackson, and get some depth there. Like, let's hope, right? I mean, they have their 2 starters, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't, add more to that. So for sure, I like that. And I think I like defense. So wide receiver is our biggest need. We really, just because of the way that the offense runs,
they should probably draft 2 receivers
for sure in the entire draft. Absolutely right,
and maybe 2 safeties and 2 defensive tackles. Like those 3, they need a lot of
2 wide receivers, 2 defensive tackles, 2 safeties, 2 defensive ends, 2 centers.
Don't forget, Daquan Jones has been injured each of the last 2 years, and he's getting older.
Yeah.
So that's still really important.
Absolutely. The good thing I will say is that defensive tackle position, which is normally, the one-tech defensive tackles, can be found in like the 2nd and 3rd rounds usually. Like it's not the same. And safety the same way. Like, sure, there's always a couple of safeties that go off the board in the 1st round, maybe 3. But like there's usually good depth at safety like throughout the draft that you can get one in the 3rd or 4th round. So
yeah.
I'm going to say I still like defensive tackle. I think Bean kind of showed his hand a little bit going after Eric Armstead. I think they think defensive tackle is a big need, even though they have both. So I think that should still say number 2 in our list of needs.
I agree.
And then safety, just I think that they'll draft one. Would I be surprised if they went to our next tier and got defensive end over safety? No. I think it's probably pretty likely, but I think that need is less. Plus, I mean, you and I have talked about it so far since the Super Bowl. We think that Von Miller will come back to form. Maybe not to what he was in 2022, but he'll definitely be better than 2023. I shouldn't say definitely because we never know, but like my guess is that he will be back to that level.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been known to be optimistic. He's betting on himself based on taking a pay cut. He can make it all back in incentives. So he's betting on himself, and he's super optimistic, and I can respect that. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but I have a good feeling about it. I mean, the guy's a former Hall of Famer. He was playing well before the injury. He's come back from the injury before. I think he was just too optimistic, and he pushed himself a little too hard. Who knows? But anytime I've ever heard a player talk about him, they're never like, well, he tried, or he just couldn't do it this year. They're just like, Vaughn is. It's just he's so good. Like they just can't help but like praise the guy, even when he had a terrible year. Like he's gonna come back. I think so. Don't quote me on that. I just have a good feeling. I don't know. He's a Hall of Famer. Like those guys just don't go away. I mean, Bruce Smith was playing well up until he was about 40, right, John? I mean, you're talking the best to ever do it, but one of the best. But
yeah, well, Von Miller's up there. I mean, not Bruce Smith, but like he's a Hall of Famer, I think.
Yeah, 100%. He is absolutely a Hall of Famer. So, and it wasn't like he looked terrible before the injury. It's just the injury, and We just thought he was going to come
No,
back.
he looked really good before the injury. Like, it was a win-win, and up until that.
Yeah, exactly. We loved the signing before that. So, yeah, defensive end, interior offensive lineman, center. Would you be surprised if the Bills went center in the first round? I wouldn't be. Would you?
Yeah, I would draft a center in the first round.
You wouldn't, or you don't think it'll happen?
I would not, and I also don't think it would happen.
Really? You think that they're that set on Connor McGovern, who's only played like 100 snaps in center at the NFL level and hasn't played at Penn State?
I think a draft pick would be Plan C. So, and I don't think they're going to do a first-round pick on Plan C. I think the first-round pick is either going to be wide receiver or a defensive player.
Interesting.
Whether it's on the line or maybe safety, but that's where I'm at. And it really depends on where the draft falls. But I think it's receiver or defensive player.
I think they go into this draft thinking defensive tackle is their biggest need. But I think if those guys are gone, I think they definitely take a hard look at wide receiver for sure. And if their guys are or if they're in another tier, then they definitely go defensive tackle. And if those guys are gone, I could see them going for safety or edge or center. I know I just listed 5 positions at the first round.
The receiver depth is funny too. Like, you have that top end, and then like the next set of guys doesn't necessarily fit who the Bills should take necessarily. So then at that point, it's like, well, we'll just wait for the next set of guys who is a better fit, that kind of thing.
Then those guys get all drafted.
Right. So either they trade up or they wait. They could be a second-round receiver, and the first guy could be a defensive lineman, tackle, or end. I mean, I don't think they're taking they're going to take safety over center in the first round if it came down to it.
Okay. I just see a world. It's not what I think will happen. I just see a world where it could happen. I think it's unlikely, but that's my dark horse first round candidate is something.
Well, I mean, if there's an infinite number of universes, obviously there's going to be the one time that something happens, but I don't think that's going to be the case this time around.
Yeah.
This is not Rick and Morty where you're just going to be like, oh, we'll just go over here and they can do this.
Yeah. Is there there's a universe where the Bills win the Super Bowl every single year,
Jealous of the universe.
And then there's a universe where we're watching this happen. Like, you and I are exactly watching this happen every year. And we're probably getting bored with it. We're probably like, ugh, like, could they not win for once? We're getting,
7-9 again for the 60th season in a row. Wait a minute, I think that happened.
We lived that universe. We were in there. The only thing that took us out of that universe was Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. So, yeah. So okay, I like that board right now. I mean, things could change. There could be another free agent signing because if safety gets signed, I'm gonna if they do sign Julian Blackman, I'm moving that down to third or fourth tier at this point. Safety.
That's interesting because I think they could sign a couple of free agent safeties potentially, which would move it down the board a lot. Blackman, Rapp, and Lewis, and
DeMar Hamlin.
He's Kendall Williamson. But yeah, I guess if they sign Blackman, then maybe I would. I mean, it's already third, right? Like, so forget the tiers. We have safety third and defensive end fourth. Would you move it? Would you move defensive end above safety if they sign Blackman?
Yes, absolutely. I think they would.
I could see that.
Yeah, if they have 2 starters, and I mean, we know how much Bean loves drafting edge rushers. I think he does.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's close, but I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I still think it's possibly close. I still think they want a young guy there.
Now, if they get Blackman and bring Hyde back or some other safety, then definitely that's what we know for sure.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if they bring Hyde back that they won't look at safety?
I think they'll still draft somebody at some point, but
yeah,
I don't think it's going to be as high of a priority. If they got brought in Hyde and Blackman,
that's not a day 1, day 2 pick. Basically, our top 2 tiers are day 1, day 2 picks. Like, it's unlikely that they go to the 3rd or 4th tier for a day 1 or day 2 pick.
Right?
Maybe corner, but
well, yeah. So I think it might still be a tier 2, right? Maybe.
What, cornerback?
No, safety.
Safeties, yeah.
Like, if they brought back Hyde and they got Blackman, even if they even if we move safety from 3 to 5 or 6, it's probably still tier 2, right? You still need a.
I'll tell you what, I have to look at the contract and the player before I decide, because if it's Micah Hyde on a 1-year contract, I'd still I'd move him down from first tier to second tier, but I still could see them drafting a day 2 or early day 3.
Right.
I
think receiver and defensive tackle are definitely the top 2 no matter what.
Yes.
It's just how you tier it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we moved defensive end down because they brought back AJ Epinesa. So if they bring back another safety like Micah Hyde, or if they bring another,
Yeah. Well, they got 4 defensive ends now. Well, 5, but 4 legitimate ones. And people are saying oh, Kingsley Jonathan should get more time with Von Miller. And that's not a terrible take based on what we saw last year.
No. Well, what do you think about this? Now that we're
they got Rousseau and Epinesa now.
Now that we're talking about it, wide receiver, defensive tackle, and safety are tier 1. And then our second tier is defensive end and interior offensive line, like center guard.
And that's depth. That's pure depth.
That's pure depth. I would argue.
And only if plan A and B fail at center. So Connor McGovern and Alec Anderson would have to fail at center for the center draft pick to work out.
I think, John, that center should be higher than defensive end. And I'm going to say this because I mentioned this earlier. I think that they'll start Connor McGovern. They have a plan in place. But if something comes their way and a guy falls to them, I think they take him. That with him potentially either being the future center for the team, or he becomes the starting center in the first year. I think that that's a position that they look at. I don't think that they love Connor McGovern, but like I said, they have to say someone. They have to say we have a plan in place, because if they don't, then someone's going to steal him from them in some round of the draft.
They're not going to ignore it completely.
You think they definitely draft one?
They're not reaching for a center though.
I wonder if they move up for one. Not in the first, probably not in the second. I think it's a scenario where if it falls to them in the first, they might take one, but more likely the second, or I guess they don't have a 3rd round pick, so the 4th round picks, right?
Yeah, that's the tough part. They don't have a 3rd. 11 picks, but no 3rd round. But who knows? They could always trade a player and a pick to move up to some spot. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's possible that they do. Yep. No.
Kyer Elam.
Dude, nobody wants Kyer Elam. Who would take him? You try to trade him away.
Former first round pick. Somebody's like, oh, I could make something out of this guy. These guys didn't know what they're doing. Like a coach that was on his staff at the time was like, oh, or a scout was like, oh, dude, I was with this guy. This guy's awesome.
Did get a fair shake in Buffalo.
Yeah, these things they can happen.
Eric Washington at the Bears, maybe that's something that he works on. They send Kyer Elam in a 4th to get a 3rd or something,
No, I like Jamarcus Ingram better than Kyer Elam at this point.
Dude, I like a lampshade better than Kyer Elam at this point. I mean, this he just hasn't.
Well, let's not get crazy, but no. So, I'm being honest here. I think, I mean, it's okay that that you didn't hit on a pick. It's fine.
It's fine because they hit on Christian Benford that same draft. But remember, that draft was deep at corner. And the last time the draft was deep at wide receiver, the Bills took 2. They took Gabe Davis and Isaiah Hodgins. Sure, they were day 3 picks, but they took 2 of them. This year is another deep wide receiver class. They have to take 2 at some point. I don't care if it's one on day 1, one on day 2.
I agree. They should take 2. I don't know why Andy Isabella is should be on the roster, or
yeah,
KJ Hamler's a flyer kind of thing, but
everyone's a flyer after the first 3.
Honestly, there's 8 guys, but there's really only 4. Diggs, Samuel, Shakir, and Hollins. Those are the 4 guys.
Hollins only because he's a special teams player, not because he's this amazing wide receiver.
And they just signed him, so they're not going to cut him.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess they could. They could cut him.
Yeah, it's unlikely.
That's happened before. But yeah, that's it. Shorter, Isabella, Shavers, Thompson, and Hamler, probably not going to be on the team. Or at least some combination of those, right? A lot of those guys are going to be training camp body.
John,
they got 4 guys, and they're going to draft 2. That's 6.
Mac Hollins has been in the league since 2017. He has had 1 season in his entire career that's had over 300 yards receiving. He has had one. He's never had a season where he scored 5 touchdowns. Like
that's why I had Moreau over Hollins on my free agent new signing list. Moreau was my number 2 after Curtis Samuel. Remember we had this discussion?
You mean Hunter Renfrow?
No, Nicholas Moreau.
Oh, Nicholas Moreau. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about
my number 2 free agent signing after Curtis Samuel because I wasn't too keen on Matt Collins. Like we just went through this, and then the only other 2 signings were Trubisky and Hawk. And Hawk doesn't really count because he was on the practice squad, right?
Yeah. They brought him because of Sam Martin's injury.
Right.
I was like a hobbled Sam Martin. A Sam Martin with half a leg is still better than Matt Hawk.
Yeah, and they signed Matt Hawk for 1 year and $1 million. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, they might cut him. I mean, it's very likely that they do cut him.
They're going to save one of the 2 punters. I don't know if it matters which.
Imagine if they could draft a guy too, as more competition.
They could. I don't know.
It's unlikely, but
all right. All right. So we got our needs, right? Receiver, defensive tackle, safety, maybe end, maybe inside. So out of the free agents that are available before the draft, is there anybody that you like at receiver or safety, defensive tackle, defensive end? Or I almost want to bring up running back because you know how I hate drafting running backs.
You hate drafting running backs.
Although, I mean, if it's like a late pick or undrafted free agent, those are fine. But there are some interesting running backs that are still available in free agency, like Ezekiel Elliott or Cordell Patterson or J.K. Dobbins on a cheap contract. Now, all these guys have their own issues. Patterson's old. Patterson is one of those guys that, I mean, he was a receiver that kind of transitioned to running back. And then you get Elliott, who's kind of like more of a bruiser. They're both older. Like Patterson's 33, Elliott's 29. Dobbins is only 24, but he's had a significant injury history. But for backup, you could get any of those guys for cheaper.
That would be like, if they got Dobbins, it'd almost be like getting that Damian Harris, signing Damian Harris last year. You know, it made sense, but like you weren't expecting a whole lot, and sure enough, he got injured, you know?
Right, yeah. I mean, they got Ty Johnson, but they got Darrington Evans, but they kind of still need another guy. Or, well, probably 2 guys after the draft, but like at least one more guy that might even be better than Ty Johnson.
Dude, I like Cordell Patterson, and the only reason I know he's older, but he does not have anywhere near the mileage that Ezekiel Elliott has.
Right. Yeah, I like that. And he's more versatile too. Like he can do more things.
Exactly. Which is kind of similar to how James Cook is. James Cook is versatile, right? Like,
but the Bills do like having a bruiser back as a backup running back too. Like Latavius Murray, and you know they had what's his face? A few I don't remember. But they even brought back like Frank Gore one year, or that might even been before this regime.
No, I think it was during this regime.
Yeah, like there's always like some real old guy that's like a bruising whatever that they like to have as a second or third running back. So that's why I think Elliott might be on the table at some point. Yeah, but I like Patterson too. Like if we're just talking free agents, and Dobbins, obviously.
Well, it's like if you look at who the Bills got to go along with James Cook last year, you mentioned Latavius Murray, Damian Harris. Like those guys were bigger bruisers. I mean, sure, some of them could, like Latavius Murray, he could receive out of the backfield, but he wasn't necessarily known for that as much as, you know, running between the tackles. I think that they get a guy that's, if they choose one, who I would like, I would rather have Cordell Patterson. Who I think they choose, I think they go for an Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, and that's if they even pick another free agent running back, but they might do that and then go like an undrafted or 7th round pick or whatever, just as long as it's not a 2nd or 3rd round or higher. I don't like that. And there's a ton of safeties still available. So, I mean, Mike Hyde was just one example, and we already talked about Julian Blackmon. But there's other guys, Justin Simmons, Jordan Whitehead, and then receiver. I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't go after any more free agent receivers. I just draft guys at this point.
I mean, I think that they could bring another guy in for like a 1 year, like $2 million deal, sort of like a Trent Sherfield sort of thing. I think Like you could look at a guy like Byron Pringle. You're no matter what, you're either going to have a guy that doesn't have a lot of success, that's older, or banged up. Like that's just what's available now.
Yeah, though. I mean, you could bring in Mike Williams, who's 29, who's going to cost a bunch. I'm trying to look at who I like.
Yeah,
I
they're
mean,
not bringing in Michael Williams.
DJ Sharks maybe, but that's not going to move the meter. From Odell Beckham, Michael Thomas. I love Michael Thomas, but like at this point in their careers, it's like they've been injured, and I just go to the draft at this point. It's a deep class, draft 2 guys, and let's see what we got.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why they drafted 2 corners that year, like you talked about before. It's like, all right, we'll hit on one of them. They drafted a first-round guy, and Benford was what, 6th round?
Yeah.
And then like I look at defensive tackle, a lot of older guys: Fletcher Cox, Shelby Harris, John Jenkins. They're a lot older guys. I think I said before, Sebastian Joseph Day visited Buffalo. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. There's a few defensive ends.
Kyle Van Noy still available, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Bud Dupree.
Remember that one year we're all like, "Oh, the Bills should get Yannick. Let's go all in on Yannick," and now he's available again. He had a bad year last year, but like he's only 29. Maybe they can get a cheap deal.
All of these players I know because I don't watch a lot of them play. It's because Bills fans wanted them at one point or another. All over it.
Elias Campbell, at 38 years old, is available. Oh my gosh!
I could see the Bills signing. Of course, we're recording this on Monday night, and by the time this podcast is released, the Bills could sign Julian Blackman. But it sounds exactly like what they want to go from, like a Micah Hyde sort of. He's like a center field sort of safety. He tracks the ball well. He has ball, top-notch ball skills. It's just his injury history is.
Yeah, and it seems like he's improved on his coverage skills since he's been in the league. So I mean, and he's young.
26.
So,
exactly, he's 26. It's young.
So yeah, I mean, that's Clowney's available. He's 31, defensive end. I don't know. That's all I got.
Yeah, same here. We'll see. I mean, we could mention 25 guys and they won't even sniff one. So, cool. Well, this has been fun, kind of getting back into the groove. This is going to, our big board of Bills needs is going to determine where we start looking at draft picks, players that the Bills could look at and I think that's kind of where we're going to start headed, because we have about 6 weeks until the draft at this point. So let's start talking about some of these players that could be available in round 1 or maybe round 2, or players that have been mocked to the Bills in those rounds, because, Osiris Torrance was the most mocked player to the Buffalo Bills last year. And that was the first round pick though. And they ended up getting him in the second round. So, there's something to that a little bit. So we'll be keeping our eyes on that. John, any final thoughts before we end this fantastic free agency summary roundup?
No, I think I'm good.
Cool. Well, thank you guys all for listening. Thanks for, sticking around for a couple of weeks when we didn't post anything. Obviously, a lot of things have been going on. I did not plan my vacation around free agency. It just kind of happened, when the hotel was available. So this has been a lot of fun. If you guys are interested, you could definitely leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Subscribe, rate, review, all that fun stuff. We definitely appreciate it. If you guys have any interest in any draft prospects that you want to talk about or whatever, or guys that you think the Bills should look at in round 1, 2, 3, 4, anywhere in the draft, feel free to email us, ctwpod@gmail.com, or send us a DM over any social media account, and we can read it, next week or in the coming weeks of the podcast, because we're going to be looking at these prospects, and we're also going to be doing some mock drafts along with the draft, like we have done last season and previous seasons before that. So a lot of fun stuff ahead. The Bills are only going to get better. Dude, speaking of free agent moves, there's been a lot. I was glad that the Dolphins re-signed or extended Tua Tagovailoa for an extension. That was good to see. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the Ryan Tannehill. I think he's better than Ryan Tannehill, obviously, but like that signing where I was like, yes, I was like, we don't really know if he's the guy for sure. Like, just extend him, just spend that big money, man. It was good to see Christian Wilkins leave. That was nice to see. He's a really good player. It's always good to see those good players leave the division. So yeah. Cool. Well, thank you guys again all for listening. Appreciate you guys being a part of the show. So signing off for John.
Go Bills.
And for me, Nate, go Bills. The future is bright, and we will talk to you guys again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Circling the Wagons podcast. Download and subscribe to us in your favorite podcast service. Email us at ctwpod@gmail.com. That's Charlie Tango Whiskey Pod @gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at CTWPod. And most importantly, go Bills!
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.
Nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, Nate.
Well, listen, the whole show is called Circling the Wagons. Say no more. I love it.